Thank you so much for joining. I'm going to jump right into it because typically, as I say, we sort of introduce the title, then we talk about who the guest is. But check it out. You can see him on screen, and you can see his picture here. Today, we're talking about influence. Okay, not all influencers are on Instagram. And here's the thing: this is very important for everyone on this call. These are going to be the key takeaways from today. All right. So look, this is the one time you always hear me say text, email, call, Slack, whatever you have. If you have people in your company, friends in the industry that need to hear this, text them, email, call them, Slack them, whatever you need to do, send them a link to this. Let them hear this live. The recording is never the same. You want to be able to engage, interact. So if you think the key takeaways of how to present yourself more powerfully, communicate with more clearly with your borrowers and your team members, and increase your influence, if any of those things sound important to you or anyone in your company or any friends in the industry that you have, send them the links now. They can join as we get going. Again, I said earlier, I'm not going to harp too long on where we're getting started, because you guys already know who's on the line with us. My name is Alex Kutsishin, co-founder, CEO here at Sales Boomerang. And my guest today is none other than René Rodriguez. René, say hello.
How are you? And thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for being here. And look, everyone, you're not seeing my face on screen today. Colorado is having, anyone that's in Colorado, you guys are feeling this with me. There's some blackout spots in Colorado right now, specifically in the Boulder area. So I have no internet. I'm using my phone to power my computer. And if I turn on the audio, the video, you guys will not hear me clearly and I'll be glitchy. And so we're going to do it this way. So appreciate everyone understanding that part of it. Well, look, René, let's jump right into it. Everyone, you know how we like to do this. We like to start with a poll, get you involved, engaged instantly. Remember, this is a conversation, so make sure you're participating in chat as we go through this process. But let's go with poll number one. What is the most important skill that leaders cultivate? What is the most important skill that leaders cultivate? I want to see you all engaged. This is how you make this conversation powerful. René is one of the best coaches, one of the strongest leaders in this industry. And if you want to get the most out of this conversation, you're going to want to engage with these polls. You're going to want to answer them. You're going to want to be part of the conversation, because if you're hearing somebody else's answers and you're not in that, you're not going to have as much come out of this experience. So what is the most important skill that leaders cultivate? Is it communication? Is it self-awareness? Is it expertise in their field? René, do you have an idea of what you think the result's going to be?
What do I think it's going to be? I would probably say that they're going to say number one, communication.
Yeah, communication. All right, let's see what happens. Let's give another 10, 15 seconds. Oh, here we go. And let's see what the results are. Look at you. It's like you've done this before, René.
A couple times.
Let's talk about this. What does that say? How did you, first of all, how did you know that it was going to be communication? And then what does this mean? And then let's talk about really what is the most important skill to cultivate.
Well, I think it's not a bad answer. I think it's a great answer that people are seeing that communication is something that we didn't really have to focus on prior to 30, 40 years ago, because we were all in the same place. Everybody died very close to where they worked and where they were born. We didn't travel, and we could see people. And I could see you. If Alex, I worked for you, I could see you every day. I walked in. We went to lunch in the same place. We got our haircuts when I needed haircuts. We got our haircuts in the same place, and we got, you probably coached my kids at school in their sports, and the grocery stores, and we saw each other. And then advancements in technology, advancements in digital communications, and transportation allowed us to willingly move further and further apart with the erroneous thought that we actually still knew each other. And that's kind of one of the things that kind of drives me right now. So we're seeing the need more and more for communication and the broader scope of what that actually means. And so that'd be my guess to that. And we should probably talk about the rest of what I mean by that. But I think communication is why I thought they would choose that, even though I research says it's something else.
Oh, what does your research show? Should we talk about that now, or explore that as we continue this conversation in further slides?
Well, we can do both. The research shows that the number one skill in leadership and this also was proven to me because I had the chance to work with some of the world's largest organizations in their leadership development. These are, Cargills and 3Ms and the Best Buys and Coca-Colas and you name it, 400 plus clients like that in 27 years. And inevitably, the first chapter of all their leadership development, the first part of it all, comes down to self-awareness.
The number 2 answer in the poll. So very interesting. The most important skill that leaders need to cultivate is self-awareness. Talk about that, because a lot of people think about self-awareness and they think about it as maybe a spiritual thing, right? Like, hey, I'm self-aware, I'm spiritual. But how does that pertain to leadership?
So I think the best way, and this is where my philosophy comes out, the best way to understand something is to look at its opposite, right? So let's just remove self-awareness from a communicator, right? They learn all the communication skills, but they lack self-awareness. So they don't know how they're perceived. They lack the self-awareness that maybe the timing of what they're saying might be off, but yet they communicate a great message, but they're choosing the wrong time. They're telling jokes when people aren't ready to be funny. They're missing the fact that their organization is scared. And maybe that the market changes are affecting people, or they lack the self-awareness to realize that, that maybe things aren't as easy for the people that work for them as it was for the leader. And they're assuming and projecting the same skill sets and the mindset onto their people that they have for themselves, instead of being self-aware and realizing that, I'm a unique person. I had a unique upbringing, so I need to be empathetic to understand where other people are at. Self-awareness is one of the cornerstones of emotional intelligence, because you have to understand where you're at. And some people aren't self-aware. They don't realize that their behavior affects other people. So then they go, no, I was just a little bit upset. Not realizing that their quote unquote little bit upset is like a sledgehammer to people that work for them. And so they need to realize the impact that they have on people. And that requires a massive amount of self-awareness. Or even just from a presentation standpoint, they're not self-aware that they realize that they're constantly fidgeting with their phones, or they're constantly perceived in looking in text messaging while people are talking, that they're not aware of their behaviors on others is one of the killers of effective leadership.
I got to tell you something. And look, everyone, just a reminder, we're talking about influence, right? Why are we, staying on this slide and we're talking about, what is the skill you need to cultivate? Because we're talking about influence. We're talking about influencing decisions that people should be confident about. And one of the most important things as a leader is self-awareness. And I got to tell you something. I went through Amplify with René, and René captured something about the lack of my self-awareness of what I was doing and who I was being on stage. And it made such a difference. And this is so important, the self-awareness that we're talking about here. And you're going to see, we're going to get into the presentation part of this in just a moment. But understand, René discovered in just seconds that I was clapping and I was pacing and I was holding you called fig leafing, remember? And René called it out. And that now I am completely self-aware of those things, and it changes the game completely in how people perceive you, because how can you influence if the perception of you is negative or misunderstood? So pay attention, guys. We're about to get into some really detailed things, because we're talking about influence. We're talking about getting your customers, getting your team, getting the industry to hear you, follow you, act on your suggestions, your advice, follow you as the leader that you're trying to be. So, René, let's talk about this. Let's talk about connecting. Like, what is using neuroscience to empower you to connect, right? Let's break this down.
So in my book that I just released, is actually on the 26th, we talk about the importance of sequence in the brain. And I want, when I'm talking about this, I want everybody to understand that you intuitively understand the sequence of human behavior, because most of you who are successful know that there's certain things that have to happen first within relationships before you can get to other things. And then when we forget that sequence, or we move out of that sequence, we find that our results are not as effective. And one of those sequences is that we have to connect with people. We have to build trust before we can deliver a value proposition or data to people. Because, for me, I don't care how important or how valuable you say your product, service, or what you do is. If I don't trust you, I can't hear you.
Mm.
and I can't move forward. And so that concept of connecting really comes down to lots of different skill sets. One is even self-awareness. Two is slowing down to listen to people. Like for me, when I go on stage, one of the first things that I do is I try to walk the audience, no matter how big the group is. I'll walk the audience and I'll stand, and as people are coming in, I try to greet them. Hey, how are you? Good. Thanks for being here. And just a connection, even if it's 1 to 2 seconds of just focused attention. My eyes make eye contact, make a good handshake, and a warm smile, and a sincere thank you. And that sincerity for me comes from, somebody said, wow, thanks for coming today. And it was an audience of about 600 people. And I said, well, thank you for coming. I said, you know how silly it feels to be up on that stage with nobody in the audience? I said, this is a mutual partnership here. So thank you for being here. And I mean that. And
I love that.
It's not a phrase or a statement or a technique. It's legit, because when you do this for 27 years, most of those years are spent in empty audiences. And so when you start getting to the place where you have larger audiences, the goal is to never forget. That's self-awareness of what it was like to not have that. And so connection with people is there. You go to outside of different countries, you can't start with business. You got to start with connection. Can we trust each other, break bread together? And then at the end, we can easily talk business. So
Well, René,
there's a sequence to that.
Let me break this down. I want, because you said something earlier. I wrote it down. I'm going to bring it back up here right now, but I want everyone in the audience to understand why you are able to make these statements. What makes you an expert in this field? Real quick. I know you don't like to talk about this too much, but tell us your background in neuroscience. Just give everybody a little bit, because then I have a question for you, and everyone needs to listen to the answer to the question I'm going to ask them, but give us a little background so people understand who you are.
Sure. So my background is in behavioral neuroscience, and when I say that, that's what I went to school for while I was selling cookware door to door. So here I am studying the brain and how things work and behavior and statistics and all of the amazing things that happen in the brain. But I went to school while I was doing that. I was selling cookware, very expensive cookware door to door, and then I went to work for a change management consulting firm that used brain research on how to create massive scale culture change in very hostile work environments. And so for 27 years, I've been a practitioner of applied science. And so I look at, learning it, not being a researcher, but yet understanding the research side of it enough to be able to have the conversations to then ask the tough questions of saying, what does this mean? Yes, you see Zig Ziglar. I worked for Salad Master. I was trained by the same people that trained Zig. So yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Steve. But what does this mean, to a researcher when they do something incredible about human behavior? What does it mean to leadership? And what is leadership? And what's the how? We can understand conceptually leadership, but what does it mean to leadership? What does it mean to communicating? What does it mean to closing a deal? What does it mean to how you stand and posture, where my eye contact is? And those little nuances that when you connect them all, make a big difference in the sales process, in a communication process. How do I bring down people's barriers and build rapport quicker, speed, trust? All of those things have been fascinating me, of how do I bridge the gap between the research, the science, and the application in real business. So that's where I come from.
Okay, so watch this. Everybody heard this. So listen to the question I'm going to ask René, because René said something, and I wonder if some of you actually heard it, and if you didn't, I want to bring it back. You said that if you don't make a connection, people don't hear you. But I want you to explain that, because I think people just be like, oh, that's just a phrase he's using. They don't not really not hear you. Tell them scientifically. People literally don't hear you. Isn't that right?
Yeah, what's happening, and I'll give you the simplest example. How many of you have ever walked up to somebody, shaken their hand, and they tell you their name, and you tell them yours, you walk away and you go, what was their name?
Yes. Everybody in the audience, tell us if that's happened to you. Have you shaken somebody's hand, walked away, and be like, who was that person's name? I can give you a big yes. 100% that's happened to me. I know for sure. Go ahead.
It happens all the time to us. It happens to me. And the reason is because the way that the way that your brain works is, it doesn't work when you're first meeting somebody. If you haven't connected with them, you don't feel, it's really about psychological safety. And the primitive side of our brain that needs to feel physical and psychological safety is sizing people up. And so the long-term memory parts of our brain, that hippocampus, if you will, that is deciding whether something was a long-term, isn't even functional at that point. And so what's happening is that we're looking at saying, am I safe? Are they going to embarrass me? What's going on? Am I presenting myself in the right light? And if this is an important meeting, There's that I want to show up well. All of the stress factors go into play and are more focused on our survival at that point, oddly, even emotional survival, than it is about memorizing someone's name. And so the way around it is to repeat the person's name. So hey, hi, my name's Renee. Oh, Alex, nice. Alex, nice to meet you. Is that short for Alexander, or is it just Alex? What do you like to be called? I just like to be called Alex. Alex, awesome. It was so nice to meet you. In fact, my son's name is Alex. And so how many times did I just say the word Alex?
Like 6 times.
Yeah. And so if I can constantly use it and ask people, is it, hey, my name's Ben. Oh, cool, Ben. Is it originally Benjamin, or do you like Ben? Right. Awesome. Cool. Ben. Well, Ben, so nice to meet you. Allison. Okay, Allison. That's okay. Allison. Is it with a Y? And then you just take an interest in the name for a minute. And what's interesting is that people love hearing their name. If you can be in a crowded room and you don't hear anything, but somebody whispers your name from 10, 30, 20 feet away, you will hear it. There's something crazy about our name. And it's a great way to build connection and a way to take an interest in somebody. Jax. Somebody says that Jax, is it Jacks? Jax? Awesome. Is that short for Jackson? No, just Jax. Oh, cool. I love that.
Yeah.
Any idea how your parents came up with that name? So it's like, if you want to remember people's name, that's a start. And there's also skills on how you can remember multiple people's names, but that's something totally different.
Well, look, so here's my point here. Here's why I wanted to do this, Renee, and wanted you to explain the science behind it, because look, there's a lot of people on the call that are thinking about this and how they're going to be able to influence the borrower to trust them, how they're going to influence their relationships. And what I wanted to do here is, so often people jump into the sale without connecting. Right. Yeah. And then they're confused why nobody heard. Like, why are they asking me this? I just told them in the first 5 minutes, I told them everything they needed to know. And they're asking me again. And now they don't trust me for some reason because I'm frustrated. And I wanted to make it clear that literally, guys, if you're going to take anything away from this conversation, there's going to be a lot to take away from this conversation. But if you're going to take anything away, if you do not make a connection, people literally will not hear you. They just won't hear the words coming out of your mouth, not because they don't want to, but psychologically they're protecting themselves and they don't trust you yet. And if you don't get that trust, which is what Renee said earlier, everything else that goes after it is gone. It's absolutely almost just into the ether, right? Maybe somewhere in their deep in their psyche, they heard you, but they're not going to be able to recall it. It's not going to be meaningful. They're not going to be able to take action on what you said. So let's keep going. What about this engage thing?
Well, I would say, even just to add to that before we go to engage, not only does it, they don't recall it, if you don't follow that sequence and you push your ideas too quickly, you push them further and further away because they don't feel like you value them. And that's, I love that. That's the challenge.
So look, from this conversation, everyone, you're going to learn, like this one lesson alone, you should see a huge impact on how people respond to you simply by making the first step, which is the connection. Let's keep going because we got a lot of cool things to cover. And I see you guys are inviting your friends because I see the number keep growing. So keep it going, guys. This is going to be a great conversation. Let's keep going, Renee. Now we've connected, we've listened, we've learned their name, we built a little bit of trust. Where do we go from here?
So engaging. What's interesting about engagement, think about this. The biggest challenge that every single person has, that you and I actually have on this right now, even I was texting Richard, are we using video right now? And the reason I was asking him that is because we're in a world right now that is highly distracted. We're in a world where companies are spending billions and billions and billions of dollars to capture our attention. And from Instagram to likes and swipes and purchases to a glance to a thought, to anything. And it doesn't matter your value proposition if I can't even capture your attention and engage you first. And one of the things, Alex, that you've seen that we, when we first started Amplify, we were talking about, engage the heart. But really right now we have to engage the mind first. I have to get to look at me. How do I get everybody, 20, however many people we've got on here, and how do I get them to put their phones down, not email, and look? And one of the things would be to have video, right? Right now, that would be one advancement, because what happens, you have a static slide, and this is why I love you, Alex, because we can take the real time feedback. We have a static slide that doesn't move. When something doesn't move, there's no dopamine being secreted, and so it becomes a habituated process. The same way we fall asleep when we drive home, the same exact way. We're so used to the road, we're used to the twists and the turns and the stoplights that we go into a habituated mode, and we don't pay attention. And then the only way that we pay attention is something is out of the ordinary. That would be a novel experience. You know, a squirrel runs across the road. We're watching, but we're watching at more of a lower conscious level, much less brain power needed until we see something that changes in our visual field. Dopamine is immediately secreted and we pay attention. And so those types of things, that's what we talk about engaging. And take engagement to another level from an employee engagement. How do we engage in our business? And that comes down to really our ability to be engaged with the vision of the organization. Do I like my manager? If my manager has my best interest at heart, I can engage in the business. Do I have a best friend at work? Do I, what's the culture like? Can I speak the truth? Do people listen to me at work? And all of those things create a level of engagement that now employee engagement is defined by your use of discretionary time and effort and thought. Like, you can pay me to come 9 to 5, but am I thinking about you on break and when I'm at home?
And so how do we give the audience here an idea of how to get engagement, improve engagement when they're talking to not just their coworkers, but the people that are looking to buy their services? Like, how do you create a level of engagement there that's above and beyond what the everyday originator, everyday manager is doing? Like, what is the next level of engagement? Because to get to engagement, everyone, listen, you have to have the connection first. You can't have engagement without connection, right? So this is a sequence. Again, we're gonna be posting a link to René's book. You guys have to get your hands on this. I know we're ordering at least 100 so we can give it to everyone in the company. But connect, engage. But how? Like, how do I engage with someone on the phone that they don't see my face? I call them about an opportunity. They got a sales Boomerang notification that they're qualified for a cash out right now. How do I create an engaging conversation?
Well, I think that let's break it down, because there's so many different levels. If I'm only on the phone, right, now I'm limited to one mode of communication, which is my voice. And so I need to first understand that if I'm talking, hi Alex, this is René Rodriguez calling. You called about a mortgage? Yeah, there's no engagement with that.
Right.
I sound boring. I don't sound confident. I'm not using the most important tool that I have as a sales professional, which is my voice. It's got to be like, Alex, great to hear from you. I just got a phone call from you. It sounds like you are in the process of the home search. How exciting is this time for you? And all of a sudden, I was like, I know that this is one of the most exciting times. How's it going so far? Asking a question, but empathizing with them. And that goes into your next piece. But it's right now, how do I customize the presentation and the conversation to them? Customization is one of the strongest forms, because you said next level of engagement or of engagement.
Yes, next level.
Right. Customization is huge in today's world. How do I customize a message to you? And, the scripting is, I'm a big, huge scripting fan, as long as your script is nimble enough to engage the person and allow a little customization within it. And for you to be able to customize on the fly, you have to do your research, understand who they are, ask good questions. And if you can't do the research, then you got to do the research through your needs analysis and asking great questions and engaging questions. And knowing that people are going to try to take you down the path that they want, which is, if they don't understand your value proposition, they're going to know your rate, what are the costs, all those kinds of things. And so you've got to be able to re-engage them with tough questions. Like, somebody says, well, what's your rate? Because now they're controlling the conversation. My response to this has been for years, I'm sorry, Alex, are you looking for a locked rate or a quoted rate? And now at this point, they're probably, wow, locked rate, quoted rate. Like, they didn't know that there were two options of rates. And what I'm doing is I'm using questions to engage them into new thinking using truth. And they're going to say, well, a quoted rate? I'm like, and then I won't even answer that question, because I know they don't know the difference. I'm going to say, are you familiar with the difference, Alex? And they're going to say, well, no, actually. I said, well, a quoted rate is pretty much anything that I can say what the rate seems to be right now. It's what you're going to hear from anybody that you talk to. But I'm going to assume, Alex, that your question is driven by wanting to calculate your payment. Is that correct? Another question.
Yes, of course.
And he's going to say, yes. I said, well, then what you need actually is what's called a locked rate. And that locked rate is not something that anybody could offer you right now without asking more questions, having more information, having you sign some things. But more importantly, have you ever been imagine going into the doctor, Alex, and immediately you tell the doctor, say, hey, I'm sick. And the doctor says, take this. wouldn't you be a little nervous saying, well, what am I taking?
Yes.
You want some questions. Well, what am I feeling? What are my goals? What are the symptoms? Do you have any allergies? I mean, there's so many questions that are involved in what people think that it's just about rate, and that's the job of the professional loan officer to help them realize that there's more, and that's how you engage them. Those great analogies like the doctor analogy, those are things that are, and if you learn to deliver them really well, and you can engage people in a way that doesn't make them feel dumb. It's more like, and so it's logical at that point. And it makes sense. And so if it's okay, Alex, may I ask you a few more questions? Because I want to make sure that whatever we prescribe for you is going to be good for you. And I'm going to assume, Alex, that your situation is not like everyone else's, that you are unique. Is that correct? And of course they're going to say yes. Those are called leading questions that honor the client. They are not, nobody wants to be cookie cutter.
And you just covered connect, engage, and emphasize just in that one example. And so everyone that's on the call, you should have been writing it down. You should be like almost salivating. We actually, René deserves a round of applause for that. That was brilliantly done. It was such a simple way to engage, because people do ask about rates. And there's many different ways to answer that. The way René just answered it makes the person engage, makes the person feel like you're listening to them. He's connecting, he's listening, he's empathizing with them by certain leading questions, by understanding, hey, look, you don't know this, that's okay. This is probably what you were asking, right? This is what is he doing? He's also positioning himself as the expert at the exact same time. So he connected, he engaged, he empathized, and then he put a question in there that's, hey, you're unique, right? And the answer is always yes. And now he's getting into the rest of the conversation. So let's keep this going, because look, already there's a ton of value and nuggets that we've taken from this conversation. If I was in the audience, I'd be taking notes. I'd be texting people like, I got a great way for us to answer people's rate question now, right? Like I'd be totally into what's happening next. So let's really unpack this. How has our reliance on Zoom, and look, we're on it now, and many of us are on it daily. How has our reliance on Zoom and webinars changed our behavior? And does it change the way we approach influencing behavior? What do you say to this?
I think it's changed all of our worlds. It's one of those things that, you and I went through this together when the pandemic hit, and how do we communicate our value proposition to the world? How do we connect? How do we do all these things through this little box? And I mean, you and I really immediately adapted to the importance of quality video, quality audio, yes, all of those things, knowing that those are the things that we could control. But I think what it's changed, because we're back to a hybrid world where we love being in person. And that is our human nature, and that won't go away. But what also won't go away is we've now realized we don't have to have all of our meetings in person. We yes, can do some things, a lot of things, with a quick Zoom call, a quick FaceTime, something where I can now see, where before it felt like kind of an invasion to do a video call. Now it's the norm. Let's just wait. I mean, who does phone calls? Everything right now is just a Zoom. Why not get on Zoom? I can see you. You're adding another mode of communication, which is facial expression and nonverbal communication. So now I can see you. I can hear you. Now those pieces increase our ability to communicate so much more. Is it in person? No. But the better we get at it, and that's the next phase, is people starting to realize the quality does matter, and there's a real science behind that.
Yeah, 100%. And look, everyone look at René's setup. Clear camera, great lighting, amazing microphone, background that makes you engage, I know for a fact René has his background the way he has it so that people can ask questions. They can say, what is that? What is that? What is that? And that's part of engagement. So we're talking about influence. If you're spending any time with your customers, with your team, with anyone on a call, and you're using Zoom, and your appearance now is the same. And you taught me this, René. René asked me this question. He says, Alex, would you walk into a client's office with a raggedy shirt, dirty shoes, not shaved, hair all messed up? And I was like, no, never. He's like, well, that's what your Zoom experience is. It is your suit. It is your appearance. It is all of that, right? And so it's so important that, again, if you want to influence decisions, if you want to make people trust and connect and engage with you, your appearance on screen is as important as your appearance in somebody's office. Is there anything else you would add to that, before we go on to the next phase?
Yeah, I mean, the reason why video and all of this stuff matters is because Zoom, the problem that people had with Zoom in the beginning was that people disconnected from the call. And the Zoom meetings were hard to create engagement. And, people would say, well, you can't connect via Zoom and you can't keep people's attention. You got to keep it short. I'm like, well, I didn't buy into that because we watched full-length movies with our families. We binge watch our favorite TV shows. And that happens through a little box. And so it's possible, very possible for us to get emotionally connected to a movie and cry. And it's not in person. And I use the example, Mr. Rogers was one of the greatest communicators and influencers of all time, and he did it all virtually. He had us glued to the TV. And so it is possible, but we have to learn new skills, just like anything else. It's a new era. It's a new world. Guess what? New skills. And some of those things come down to what we call overcoming disassociation. We disassociate from the Zoom calls because I can barely hear you. I can barely see you. I can barely make out what you're doing. Your lighting is horrible. The audio is horrible. And so I disassociate to things that are more interesting in front of me. But when you increase the level of your lighting, and lighting helps you see facial expressions, right? And so right now, I think you see me in a little box. If I would ask I would ask right now if you can to the host, if you can, Richard. There you go. So make it bigger. There you go. So now you can see my facial expressions instead of people show up with bad lighting. It's no different than me showing up like this to a call. And here I've got my sunglasses on, and people say, "Oh, that's kind of funny." I said, "Well, I can barely see you based on just bad lighting. They'll have lighting that covers up their eyes. And if I can't see your eyes, I can't see the facial expressions that you're making, right? And all of those things. Our eyes communicate more non-verbally than any other part of our bodies. And if I don't have good lighting and I don't see what's going on, I don't know the meaning behind the actual meaning. Poker players wear sunglasses because they don't want to give away what's going on. They know that that's the biggest leak of information. And so utilizing good lighting and then a good microphone. Watch what happens when I move my microphone just away just a little bit if I don't understand how to use it. Imagine trying to pay attention to this if you couldn't hear me versus something that sounds like this. So now this pierces through the screen. And even if I get closer, because we got a good podcasting mic, and I can pierce through the screen versus something that sounds like this. And that's how most of us sound. Or worse, we sound like we're in a tin can. And it becomes annoying, it becomes frustrating, distracting. And if I'm trying to communicate a message, why have any noise? Why not make it easy for us to happen? So it's changed everything. And I think it's changed for a very positive reason and in a good way if you learn to embrace it.
Well, so a couple of key takeaways from what René just shared, right? If you're using Zoom, if you're using any sort of FaceTime, any sort of video connection, video calls with your customers, with your team, with people that you want to have an influence on, that you want to follow you or have some sort of impact on their lives, it is so important to have good lighting, have good microphone, have a good setup, good look. It is literally representing you. And in sales, if you're on here looking to improve your team's sales, your own sales, just getting the right lighting and the right camera and the right microphone, you will see a huge, huge impact. I mean, I don't want to promise you a doubling of your conversions, but it's going to be a significant impact versus, the camera is too high, the camera is too low, your microphone is not even working. Sounds like you're in a can. You are making it difficult for people to understand, and they will not make decisions. And so watch this. I'm going to share something. And René, I don't know if you've seen this study, and then I'm going to move or heard about this study. Then I'm going to move to the next slide. But we recently did a study with experience.com. That group,
Yep.
right? Okay.
Very well.
And so the study that was done showed that millennials and Gen Zs want to make decisions in groups. They do not want to be one-on-one with someone anymore. They want a peer near them, a group of people that ask questions. And when you're done asking questions and you hang up, then the peer has influenced my decision. They feel safer. They're like, if somebody asks questions and I'm afraid to open my mouth, but I would have asked that question and I hear answers and I see people buying into it and this really feels good, I am more likely to buy. In fact, millennials are starting to say that it's not just the review that's making them help the decision. It's what are people talking about now, right now, together in this moment. And so guess what? B2C webinars are about to become one of the most powerful tools in all of business, in finance specifically, where you're going to have 15, 20 people that are going through a similar thing, whatever it may be, a cash out, a purchase, or whatever it is. And they want to hear from you speaking to a group rather than one-on-one sales with a loan officer and a borrower. It's going to be a loan officer and 20 borrowers, or a branch manager and 20 borrowers. And so this becomes even more important. I don't know, Renee, if you have anything to add to that, but this is exactly what this is about. This is why we're having this.
So think about it from this perspective, right? One, I love tests like that, and being able to leverage that is good. And I ask myself, why? Why in groups? Well, what do we know? There is what in numbers?
Safety. Yeah.
There's safety in numbers, right? And so it goes back to the initial question the brain always asks first: am I safe? Psychological safety. And if companies, which they have done a poor job of making people feel safe, there's been a lot of deception, politics, people are deceiving. So these groups have been lied to, and people are seeing through it. And so their way of creating safety is in numbers. The way around it, if you can't get them in groups, is to be really good at making people feel comfortable and safe. And so that's immediately where I go to. And that skill set of helping people feel comfortable with you, that they can trust you, is what they're trying to create for themselves within groups and safe groups.
And millennials, right? Millennials have figured out that, they're one of the biggest decision makers and influencers in business right now, right? They're going to have the buying power. And so one of the things that they've figured out is that they're ready to make decisions, but they make decisions based on information and not just what did my parents do. As a matter of fact, we learned that millennials and Gen Z, the Gen Z world, may talk to their parents, but that is no longer the place they make their final decision from. Right. It is their peers. They'll take the information from their parents and go to their peers, exactly what Renee's talking about, because it's safety. They're going to take it to their peers. They're going to talk about it with their peers, and then they're going to make a decision. And so it's so important to create that sequence of connect, engage, be empathetic, and then using things like Zoom and using other sources of communication that are no longer just a phone call, where your face actually will make the difference in if they buy or don't buy, if they trust you or don't trust you. So all of this it drives to, again, safety, security, to be able to influence. And so let's go back to the concept of influence.
Can I add one
Please, yeah, of course.
What's crazy is that I grew up in a world that the referral was the most important and most valuable part of business. But you can give somebody a referral, and you know what they're going to do? They're going to look you up online. They're going to look at your reviews, and they're going to see your social media presence, and then they're going to make a decision. And what happens is it's over 75% of people will choose a review or social media presence to make the decision over a referral.
Oh my goodness.
And that blew my mind.
Wow. That is yes. So this is a perfect tie into this next question. Influencing behavior sounds like, and I've heard this, Renee, not just in this context, but in many different for years in many different places, that isn't influence like persuasion, and you're making people do something. So let's dive in. Influencing behavior sounds like lenders might be trying to trick borrowers into choosing them. How would you define influencing behavior for mortgage lenders?
Well, what you're really talking about is influence versus manipulation.
That's it.
And there's a big difference. And so manipulation is using persuasion to an extreme. First part of the definition, to an extreme. But the other part is at the expense of someone else.
Oh,
and so those two pieces where we say to an extreme and at the expense. And so you have to be able, this is where the ethical conversation comes into play. Influencing tools, persuasion tools are powerful. And so is a gun. And somebody says, well, how do you know you're not misusing it? I said, well, if I were to put a gun in your hand, would you turn around and shoot me? They'd say, no. I said, why? Well, those are not in accordance to my values and who I am. I said, exactly. That's what drives our behavior. And so learning these things and building self-awareness around the power that we have with these tools is the critical component to being able to do that. And so influencing is very different. If I am using influence behavior and persuasion to get you to realize that you need to stop renting because you're going to regret it in 10 years, I think that's a great. Now, the other difference is that usually manipulation is underhanded, and people don't know it's happening. Influence is very on top of the table and very explicit. And I'll tell people, I said, look, I'm going to put my best effort to convince you of this because I care enough to be unreasonable right now. I don't want to have a conversation in 5 years or 10 years where you're mad that I didn't explain to you the wealth building opportunity that you have right now by moving out of renting and into buying. And I want to use everything that I can to persuade you. That's a very explicit statement. And there's other ways, and so if I'm trying to get you to avoid or do something that at the expense of you, that's different.
And I love what you said, and I'm about to post this in chat. I care enough to be unreasonable right now. Okay, that is a very vulnerable statement, and vulnerability is part of connection, right? We feel for each other during that time. So I care enough to be unreasonable right now, and I'm doing this for you. And listen to what René said. He is telling the listener that I'm going to do everything in my power to convince you of this because I care. The very opposite of manipulation, where it's like, look to the left, I'm going to go right. Look to the right, and I'm going to go left. That's manipulation. That's trying to get somebody's attention to look somewhere else when you're, and I love how you said it, René, underhanded. They're being underhanded. They're being slick. They're being sly. They're finding a way to lie and cheat you, but make it look like they're not. That's not what René's talking about. Influence is not about that. It is front and center. It is transparent. It is honest. It is brutally honest because you care. And I'm going to post this in chat here because that is a very powerful statement. If you have the confidence to say, I care enough to be unreasonable. What does unreasonable mean? Unreasonable means I'm going to be kind of pushy here. I want to push you to be a little out of your own comfort zone to listen to me. Is that about the right concept there?
Yeah.
René?
I mean, let's go to an extreme example. Alex, if I felt I had a cure to a disease that was killing you right now, and I presented it in a weak format, and you're like, yeah, René, I just, and I came to him like, dude, I think I know how we can solve this. And I presented it because I wasn't, overly prepared. I didn't want to be pushy, and you come back to me 6 months later and you're like, René, that thing you talked about? I'm like, yeah, I think it's too late now. We needed to start 6 months ago, buddy. I'm sorry. You'd be pissed.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I'd be like,
Why
dude, I
weren't
thought we were
you?
friends.
I have to care enough about you to be unreasonable. I mean, no reason you're going to give me is going to be enough for me to not offer you at least the best foot forward on this solution. And what I tell people, you should push not to get them to buy. You should push to get to your best place to present the fullest information in the best light possible so that they can make a full decision based on all the pertinent information. That's what you push for. You don't push for the sale. You push for, can I get myself in the best position to best communicate the full value of what I'm talking about? And so that they can then say, okay, look, whether you buy or not, I just need you to understand what decision you're making.
I gotta cheer that on. I gotta do that. I don't know if you heard it or not, if it came through properly or not, because that is the difference. And people can feel the difference. Okay. They can feel the difference when they know you're trying to put them in the best place and not try to sell something. It's so important that again, at least 3 or 4 nuggets have come out of this conversation that if I'm sitting in the audience, it's so excited to share this with my team and try it out today. By the way, this is very important. Don't just learn something, use it, right? If you just learn something today and you don't put it into action, it's going to wither away. Start to use it today, literally put it into action today, email, text, call someone and practice this exact conversation. Get a new microphone, order it today, get some lighting, order it today. Don't wait. You will see the impact a little bit of investment makes. And so it's so important. I love how René just said the fact that I care enough to be unreasonable. And remember in your mind, when you leave this call and you've taken some notes, remember in your mind the concept of you talking to your best friend, a family member that has a terminal illness, and you found a solution. Would you just say, I have an idea. Let me know when you have some time to talk. Okay. I think I have something that can help you. Or would you be like a firecracker? You just explode with a phone call. You might even drive to their house. You might, whatever you do, you're going to make sure they listen and they listen carefully because you're about to save their life. That is the way you can approach the conversation with your borrower. Really, anyone, but we're talking about it in the mortgage space right now. If we're talking about influence and you're talking about making sure the consumer makes the best decision. If you don't believe that what you're offering is going to be the best decision, say that too, by the way, right? Hey, you just applied for this. I don't think this is good for you. If you sell them something that you don't even believe in, there's no repeat business. That's just so stop there and care enough to stop them from making a poor decision, right? Sometimes no sale is the best sale. Okay. And make sure that you are caring enough to be unreasonable, to convince them of what you believe is the best thing. Now, look, if your customer disagrees and they still want to move forward, they say, no, this is what I want. You're going to service them. They're going to do it anyway. You're going to offer them the best service that you can offer them, but be clear on your position. So remember that quote, write it down. I care enough to be unreasonable right now. Let's jump into this poll for just a moment. Let's get you guys engaged again. Everybody, take a look at your screen. If you were just listening and you're getting people into the room with you so that you can hear René's influence on you, stop for a minute. Look at your screen. There's a poll on there. It says increasing. What do you think is most important in increasing your influence? What do you think is most important in increasing your influence? Is it coaching? Is it training? Is it self-study? Think about this. How can you improve and increase your influence on the people around you? Let's see what we get here. Let's give it another 15 seconds and then let's get these answers. I'm really excited to see where this goes. And by the way, the very last question in this conversation that we're having is one of the most powerful questions. Of course, we save the best for last. So make sure you stay tuned to the final question. Is going to be a powerhouse of a discussion once we bring it up. Okay, let's see what the poll response here was. What do you think is the most important in increasing your influence? All right. What do we have? We have coaching. 29% said coaching, 36% said training, and 36% said self-study. What do you say here, René?
Well, I was fascinated. I thought people would say coaching. You know, so my take on this is all three.
All three.
And a lot of the coaching comes into play because coaches can help you see things that you can't see. And training, you got to get trained, so you got to put that stuff to practice, because learning influence skills one-on-one doesn't really work. That's why our Amplify course, you have to do it in front of a room. You can't do it one-on-one unless you've already been trained in front of a room. Then we can work on refining the skill sets, but you have to put it to work in training. And then of course the self-study and learning and being curious and searching for things on your own, all of those are absolutely critical. And so my answer, I'm going to take D, all of the above.
All of the above. And look, René, what was really interesting is we had pretty much a split decision, right? Almost identical. And so that is exactly the goal here, was to get everyone to see that all three of these are going to be necessary. You have to have all three. Look, speaking from my own experience, and again, I wish I had my camera on, I could look everyone in the eyes and share this. Speaking from my own experience, we've been in business for 5 years. Sales Boomerang's been in business for 5 years. I had to learn how to be a great influencer. Okay. I didn't have the background in mortgage and finance to be able to stand on stage and speak intelligently and get people to listen and follow me. I had to become engaging. I had to connect with this industry first and then engage, and all exactly the sequence that you put out there. And you've seen in a short 5 years the impact Sales Boomerang has made on the industry, but it came from understanding how to influence people. And again, not persuade, not manipulate, but influence. How could I get the entire industry to at least hear what we had to say about what we believe is best for this industry? And I followed very similarly, step by step, exactly what René is talking about. And the results have been tremendous. And literally, coaching, training, and self-study is all the things I constantly do. René is one of my coaches, and it's made a huge impact. You guys know, you've seen Sales Boomerang. It is we are the fastest growing organization in the space today, and is all about influence. People ask all the time, Renee. They do. They're like, Alex, how'd you guys do it? Well, besides having an amazing team, it is utilizing these exact skills that we're talking about today. And we didn't influence one-on-one people. We influenced hundreds of thousands of originators and hundreds of lenders to just think about their business a little differently, right? Look inward, right? And can produce the results they're producing outward. And so this takes me to towards the last questions coming up next. Become a better leader. Renee, what does this mean to you, and how should the audience perceive this?
Well, to me, the question of leadership is what I've wrestled with for 27 years. And I look at that and say, okay, my frustration around the leadership conversation is that it's usually distilled down to inspiration, quotes, and motivation. And those are all means by which we achieve what I think is the most important skill in leadership, which is influence. Influence is the how of leadership. How do you be a better leader? You influence more. And so what do I mean to do to influence more? I need to learn all of the skill sets and the science. And the good news is it is a science and it can be learned. But just like anything, it requires skill. It requires, practice and discipline and consistency and time. But it is the most important thing you can do as a leader. How do you become a better leader is learn how to influence behavior. And that means you got to learn listening. You got to raise your emotional intelligence, your EQ. You got to learn how to present and cast a vision. You got to be a good storyteller. You got to understand the science of what we call tie downs and frames and controlling and managing narratives. You got to develop the self-awareness to know where you're at and the empathy to know where your other people are at, and develop skills to adjust how you feel to meet them. That's the trinity of emotional intelligence. How am I feeling, and being able to understand and be aware of how you feel, how other people feeling, where are they at? It's empathy, and then discipline and skill to be able to adjust myself to meet them there. That all of it comes down to the skills of influence, and obviously the courage to go first. Leaders always go first, but we live in a you go first society. Yeah, I want people to be vulnerable, but no one's being vulnerable, so I won't be. Well, that's why you have to go first. That's why leaders do stuff that no one else is doing. And then all of a sudden people are like, oh my God, they told the story. I couldn't believe they told the story, which made it safe now for others to tell the story. Leaders don't live in a you go first society. They go, I'm going to go first.
So powerful. So powerful. And this leads us to in my opinion, one of the most impactful parts of this entire conversation. How can we be sure our impact doesn't leave the room when we do? Listen to this question, everyone. How can we be sure our impact doesn't leave the room when we do? How can you be sticky, right, and memorable? And that's where influence is so important. Renee, I think we could spend an entire hour just on this. Give us the most important points here.
So this question, if I know Richard, he took it from our website, and because this is one of those things that is probably at the core of what I believe, and one of the challenges is, how do you make change that actually lasts? How do you make something that people will remember? Because rah and motivation and adrenaline is going to be going away very quickly, especially once customers start calling. But how do I make an impact that lasts longer than my presence does? And that comes down to the difference between learning and motivation. So Alex, think about how long does it take for you to get home, let's say from the office?
Let's say 20 minutes.
So 20 minutes. Okay, perfect. And so it takes you 20 minutes to get home from the office. And what if I could show you, do you think you can do it in 15 minutes?
Ooh, I feel like I would have to speed a little.
You have to speed a little bit? Okay. Do you think, I don't know, let's see, could you do it in 10 minutes?
Oh, that seems impossible.
Seems impossible. Why?
The rules on the road. I mean, I have to follow the rules.
All right. Well, let's say you didn't have to follow rules. Could you do it in 5 minutes?
I think I could do it.
How about 5 minutes?
I don't think a car exists that's fast enough right now.
Yeah. So the thing limiting you is called the laws of physics, right? That's a paradigm that we live under. The laws of physics say we can't go that fast, in sort of a readily available mode of transportation. And so for me, What if I were to show you, a door that you didn't know, a bush behind your house, and you go back there, you move the branch, and all of a sudden a little place comes up, and you step in, and then all of a sudden you're there in 2 minutes.
Oh,
And now this
I'll
is
take 10 of
fictitious,
those,
obviously.
please.
But it's fictitious. But now, if I showed you something new that was possible that made such an impact on your life, would I ever have to remind you of it again?
No.
No, I wouldn't have to send out a memo. Hey guys, don't take the 20-minute route home. Take the minute and a half route through the behind the bush. People would be like, yeah, of course we would. I don't need motivation. I don't need to be reminded, because it just makes sense. It's such a tangible, efficient increase in my world, such a benefit, that I would do that. And so then we ask the question of what new learning, what new awarenesses are you giving your clients? What things that they go, wow, I never thought about it that way? Because those create new paradigms, new lenses by which they view the world. And once you see an increase like that, you cannot unsee it. They call it the point of no return. And so once you show people visually, that's the power of what Sales Boomerang does, Mortgage Coach, is you show people the power of investing and purchasing and getting into homeownership the right way. They can't unsee those benefits. And then not only show them on paper, but you handhold them through what's going on. And then they do their first one, and you were there the entire time. They can't unlearn that.
And you've set a new standard, right, Renee? Like if they ever get anything less, they're like, wait, I got to go back to that thing.
Absolutely. You got to almost ruin them in that sense. It's like mom's lasagna or whatever, the homemade thing that you grew up with and nobody else can make any better. You've got to give that level of service, but also more importantly, you've got to create new awarenesses, new experiences that are so enlightening that last beyond. And sometimes that comes from a wow. And the wow experience is by listening to the specific need of the client. I'll give you one last example.
Yeah.
Back in the day when we used to take a paper 1003, and we would train our loan officers to look for wow opportunities, things that we could just listen that were customized. And we had one young mother would come in with her daughter, and she had her daughter in her bassinet, and the daughter would cry, and she had a sleeve of Ritz crackers, and her daughter would wah, and she'd give her the Ritz crackers, and the daughter would go yum 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 and eat it, and then start crying again, give her another Ritz, and then wah, yum 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 wah, yum yum yum, and she would eat this, and the mother just looks at my loan officer and says, and by the way, I did used to own a mortgage company back in the day, looks at her and says, I don't know what I would do without Ritz. They're my only sanity. And you could just see sort of the pain in her face. And my loan officer was trained to look for these moments, and she just wrote Ritz at the top of the 1003. And what do you think showed up upon closing? A Costco-sized box of Ritz with a ribbon on it that says, congratulations on your new home. We hope this makes the next few days just a little bit easier. And that, of course, the client went, wow. But why was that so impactful? Not because we spent $5.85 on Ritz. It's because the client felt heard. They felt like they were seen for their pain and their struggle. And when you can see people for what they're at and where they're at, and you meet them there with a custom solution or a custom gesture, that impact lasts way longer than your meeting.
Yeah, you would lead. So think about the example that Renee just gave us. Anytime that loan officer reached out to that customer, there's 100% chance she remembered him, and she knew that if she engaged with that person again, it would be a memorable experience again, even if it wouldn't be the next time. She expects it to be that, and she trusts that it will be that. And that is how you make an impact and be memorable even after you leave the room. What new awareness are you giving your client? What new awareness? What can you teach them? What can you give them? How can you wow them? Dave from Mortgage Coach always says, give them the wow experience, right? Mm-hmm. How can you wow them? And if you can teach them something new, if you can give them something of value beyond what they came to you for, but do not do it just to be like, Renee said I should influence them and give them some. I don't really believe in this, but I'm just going to do it. Look, our BS meters these days are better than they've ever been. They are sharpened and they are on and they're ready to go. So be honest, be genuine, give something of value that you believe in and you care about, and always try to leave your customer with something new, something novel that's just for them, and it's delivered by you. René, we've come to the end of our conversation. I appreciate every time we spend together, and everything you just gave this audience is pure gold. From the very first conversation about rate and how to answer that question, to giving you something novel, to be memorable, so that when you hang up the phone and the next loan officer calls, they go, you know what, this person doesn't sound anything like the person I just spoke to, and I want my mom's homemade lasagna. So you can't replace it. I hope everyone enjoyed this. I hope everyone goes out. We put your link to the book in the chat. I hope everyone goes out and grabs it. If influence is important to you, there's no better person to learn it from. I know, I've gone through his classes. I truly am a huge fan of everything you do and the way that you do it. So thank you, René, so much for your time today. Audience, thank you so much for participating. Anything you want to leave us with, René?
No, I'd say if those who want to connect, please follow me on Instagram at @CRenéSpeak. @CRenéSpeak. It's SEE René Speak, RENE. And please buy the book. Let me know you bought it. Tag me and let me know. Let's talk about it. Read it. Ask questions. Let's engage. I put 1.5 years into that, my heart and soul. And so I'm eager to talk about it. And for those who read it, let's chat. And it does launch. By the way, we've been #1 on Amazon's new releases for almost 2 months now. And we just doubled the requirements for getting on Wall Street Journal bestseller. So we are very hopeful that we're going to be a Wall Street Journal bestseller.
I love it. Congratulations, René. I hope everyone heard that, heard that cheering. Thank you, René. And absolutely highly recommend it. I know, as I said to everyone before, we are literally getting it for everyone in the company, because this is how much we believe in influence. We believe in creating leaders at every stage. All the 100+ people on the Sales Boomerang team are all influencers, and they all should learn how to influence properly, right? To be that sticky influencer, not to influence and then the door closes and they're forgotten, but to be a proper influencer. And so we're all invested into it as a whole company. So René, thank you so much. Appreciate you making time today. Everyone, thank you. Hope you all got some wonderful nuggets out of this, and you can put it to use today. Don't just learn something, use the thing that you learned, and use it today. René, thanks again. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you, my friend.